All right, we're back. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, GamecockCentral.com. Of course, talking South Carolina sports. And I will admit it off the bat here, Chris. I would say a little less energy from the room today.
Yeah.
Um, and earlier in the day, we were trying to track down the story with Lloyd, and we were like, man, we need to know. We didn't know exactly what's taking place before we hop on, you know, a YouTube live or a Facebook live or anything like that. And then, we get the news obviously confirmed by South Carolina that Lloyd is indeed out for the season. And yeah, man, I will say you can feel it from the fan base. I think you can feel it from the team as well. That we'll start right off the bat. This is a blow for the Gamecocks and one that comes obviously very early in camp.
Yeah, it's extremely disappointing, for so many people. And I'll echo what, Mike Bobo said during his media availability today is that first and foremost, you feel awful for MarShawn. He's just a guy that you feel bad for any athlete that's injured, but for him, man, he just had so much going for him. Everything we'd heard is that he was going to be the number one back this year as a true freshman. He'd been so impressive since he got on campus back in January. He's been exactly what the staff thought he was during the recruiting process as a player and as a person, and has just been extremely impressive with his work ethic. Great worker, wonderful kid, just beloved in the building, really. And I think that was evident, man, by injuries happen in football, even ACLs happen. But when they happen to a guy that was as heralded as he was, as important as he was going to be to the team this year, as talented as he was, but also you see the reactions of everybody or hear them, start to hear those trickling out from the building and just how devastated everybody is for him. That really, to me, speaks volumes. And so, yeah, you feel bad. There's no doubt it's a big blow to this team because of the role that he was going to play, how explosive he is.
Yeah, and man, I think to your point, it's one of those things where we know injuries are going to happen, and we know that obviously these players know that, Chris, and it's one of those things where they obviously prepare themselves mentally for that, and they prepare themselves, to accept the fact you might get hurt while you're on the field, but do you really expect it to actually happen? Probably not. And I think this is one of those things where, like you said, you really hate it. And I'm gonna be honest. It's when you do this for a living, some of the stuff, that basically when it's your job, you sort of take out some of the aspects that maybe a fan watches the game with. But man, I just had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach when I learned that news. Just because, and MarShawn Lloyd's not even, some of these recruits we've maybe gotten to know them very well on a personal level. Lloyd, he sort of just did his own thing, kept to himself for the most part during the recruiting process. We had some interviews with him, but not even because I personally knew him all that well, but just because of all the positive feedback you hear about him as a player and a person, and just the excitement you hear. I mean, dude, everybody that has been asked about this team as far as current players, before the news trickled out about the injury, you could just feel the excitement. Even Deshaun Fenwick today, this morning, was like, man, I wish you guys could get out there and see this kid run. And because he was asked basically, hey, if does it annoy you at all? I can't remember the exact wording, so I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. But basically, are you bothered by the fact that you, Deshaun Fenwick, a returning player, have sort of been overshadowed by the fan base, by somebody who's a freshman and hasn't played? And he just laughed. He's like, no, man. He's like, you always want to have a MarShawn Lloyd in the room with you, in your running back room, in your position group. And he said, man, I wish you guys could see what this kid could do. So, he talked about him. Colin Hill talked about him. Ryan Helinski talked about him. There was excitement within the program for the kid. And, he's young, modern medicine, right work ethic. That's a big, I think rehabbing and getting back to where you were before, actually having the mental ability to push through some of the stuff you're going to go through, frankly, it's tough mentally. Having that ability is a big part of being able to physically come back from an injury. So Lloyd, we hope, you would think, is going to be fine long term, but you just you really, I mean, we can't say it enough. You just hate it for the kid. You hate it for his teammates. I was trying. So Bobo and T-Rob just finished talking. I was trying to get a clip for you guys loaded up to play right now, but it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that on the fly. So we'll have that on our YouTube later on. But yeah, in a second, we're going to get to what it means for South Carolina moving forward. But for a moment, I think this is a day where you can just feel once again this fan base, just sort of had the air let out because there was some excitement building after the first 2 days, and then boom, the bubble has burst a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, it hits a little bit different, again, because of both for fans and for people in that building. People in the building, they feel awful for the kid, and there's no doubt you can't sugarcoat or diminish how big of a blow it is because, there's a reason this kid was expected to be the lead dog this year in the running back room, and there's a reason he was a 5-star. I mean, he's a different cat, and he's got a chance to be really good, and I think he'll recover from this, and he'll be really good. I think he'll show that. And we've seen plenty of athletes who are really talented and great kids come back from it. And you're right, Wes, a big part of that is the mental aspect. And so I think he'll be able to do that just fine. But, it's a significant blow. It is deflating to the fan base because there's so much excitement about seeing him this year. There's so much excitement about having this highly ranked guy since Marcus Lattimore come on campus to try to revitalize the running game and a new offense and a new year. People so excited about the prospect of getting football back after a long layoff and so many questions about it. So it's all just sort of piled on. But, people are disappointed, and they should be. There's no doubt. But the flip side of it, man, is that things are going to progress. And from what was intimated today, Will Muschamp talked with the team about moving forward and, always talks about next man up. And that's what they're going to have to find at running back. There's still the potential for a season out there. There's still potential to try to be better than they were last season. And so that the focus is going to turn to the other guys now. But no doubt the MarShawn Lloyd stuff is going to sting for a while, as it should. It's completely understandable.
Yeah. And man, I, like you said, you sort of have to, if you're the team, I think in some ways, man, this is much like, just from a mindset approach, this is much like when, you lose a big game and you kind of take a 24 hours to digest it. And, and MarShawn had a great tweet, a great Instagram. I mean, he's hanging in there mentally. Like he's accepted it already. It looked like, and just had a, minor setback for a major comeback was the last thing he said there on social media. So, I think the kid is going to be fine, but for the team and for everybody around it, you kind of just have to accept it. And then tomorrow wake up and go to practice and start to try to take that, Muschamp's been teaching or preaching next man up since he arrived. So that's kind of the approach that you have to take to this thing. So, as far as how it happened and why it played out the way it did, as far as it being reported, we had some people on GamecockCentral.com who, were talking about the fact of, well, why did it come out today, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't have practice today. Well, essentially it happened yesterday. From what I was told, it's one of those things that, there's really, you can put knee injuries in two types of categories, Chris, in a general standpoint, not from like a medical standpoint, but sometimes there's obviously the ones we all think about, like the brutal looking ones where somebody gets hit wrong. But then there's the other type of knee injuries where you step wrong, just something happens. It's just a freak thing. And you maybe don't even realize at the time how bad it is. And, I don't think South Carolina actually found out until either late last night or this morning just how bad it was. I had heard it was this morning. Then Bobo said something about last night. So I don't know if they maybe had gotten further word it might be bad last night and then it was confirmed this morning, or when exactly they knew. But the reason why it sort of played out the way it did was because at first this wasn't something where it just kind of happened and everybody on the practice fields were like, oh gosh, huge injury. I think the news started to trickle out to the rest of the team that it was actually a big injury because, earlier today, I should say, because even Colin Hill mentioned MarShawn Lloyd among the guys who had impressed him, in practice in a post-practice interview yesterday. So, that's sort of why it sort of played out like that, I would say, Chris. And then the rumor started going around this morning. Then South Carolina confirmed it. And now we obviously know he's out for the year. So, okay, if there's a next man up, and I see your comments on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook. So obviously the question everybody has is what's next? Who is next man up? For South Carolina, I think there's probably two answers to that question. Is who is next man up in practice tomorrow the same answer as who is next man up over a month from now when they start the season? Chris, I would say maybe not. Obviously, I think when you look at practice right now, you probably start to lean on some of your veteran guys. Not even veterans. I don't know if I should even use that word, but your guys who have been there, right? Kevin Harris, Sean Fenwick. Sean Fenwick's come in with a great mindset. He was the player of the day in practice yesterday. But I think you start looking a month ahead, Chris. This is something you and I have talked about off the air. We're sort of both have heard similar things and both sort of on the same page on this. I think Zaquandre White is the person you circle as far as being someone they need that dynamic threat at running back. And to me, the kid on this roster right now who has the best chance to provide that, for me, has got to be Zaquandre White.
Yeah, he's got the best chance to take over sort of that dynamic role, and look, even with a fully healthy MarShawn Lloyd out there, and regardless of how the rest of the running back room played out, Zaquandre was going to have a chance to see the field this year. This isn't a situation where we're saying, well, now that MarShawn Lloyd's not going to be in the picture, he can now get some playing time. It's really not that. Zaquandre is a guy that people were sort of eyeballing as, hey, this kid might could see the field this year, maybe even step up to that number 2 role and do some good things with his carries. It's sort of wide open. And so now with this news coming out, people are already eyeballing Zaquandre as the guy who's going to have a chance. I mean, he's a guy that his high school tape is very impressive, highly ranked kid, had a really good season at junior college ball last year, got bigger, he's filled out. Athletically, he can really run. He's got good size. He's tougher between the tackles than even you would think, just based on sort of the book out of high school on him. And so he's going to have a chance. He's looked good. He's had a good attitude. From our understanding, he's done some nice things. For him, the biggest question is just going to be, and we've talked about this before, mentally adjusting, picking up the system. It's early in camp. He's a first-year guy. He wasn't here in the spring. And so it'll be all about picking up the system. And then behind him, you're going to have Harris, Fenwick, Rashad Amos. Those guys are all going to have an opportunity now, even more of an opportunity. There's, for me, Wes, and I just wanted to address this because I saw it in the comments. I mean, I don't have any doubt that MarShawn Lloyd was going to be the number 1 guy based on what we heard within the program, right? But behind him, how it shook out, there's still some questions. And so now it's who's going to grab that number 1 role. How's the rest of it going to shake out? And all those guys that we mentioned have done some good things since the beginning of the year and in spring ball. And Fenwick's been more consistent than he has been during the rest of his career. So it'll be fascinating. But I do think White has the best chance now to step up into that sort of who's our bigger play guy, at running back. And I think he could potentially provide that pending how he picks up everything from here on out.
Yeah, and we for those of you who are on our YouTube right now, we do have some highlights on there of him from JUCO. If you search back on our video page. But he can play, and obviously the addition of him now becomes, astronomical, right? Like you can't even put it's hard to qualify or quantify what that means for them. I think we sort of use the word wild card for White, as in, this is a guy that getting him in before, could pay huge dividends, but maybe isn't a huge necessarily, like they would have been fine if he didn't, I think. But now you look at it and we're saying, okay, thank goodness for them that they did, because I think, like you said, he's got a chance to be the top guy. And Chris, the unfortunate thing for South Carolina is that we always talk about injuries at the running back position, right? And, when we've talked about the depth at this position all the way down to Rashad Amos, and our thought process was, well, throughout the year, you might need that third or fourth guy. You weren't really talking about you might need to start getting into your depth before the pads have even gone on.
Right.
So that's what's unfortunate for these kids and for these guys. And I do think, and there's been, I see this stuff on Twitter. You see all types of opinions on Twitter, Chris. I get how the staff and the team has been snake bit with injuries the last 2 years, but I don't see how you can. This was just a freak thing. Like, this is not. It's hard to put blame on anybody for a freak accident this early in camp. This wasn't that he was being overused or overworked or anything like that. It was a freak thing in practice. It wasn't that. None of those things really play in, I think, as far as this. So I think that's worth pointing out as well. Okay, so do you have more right now you want to add on Lloyd, or should we move on to some other comments from coordinators?
Yeah, let's move on to coordinator comments. Unless if y'all don't mind, if we plug a Gamecock Central piece, we talked about some of it here for sure, and always want to give you guys the full sort of scope of what we're hearing. But I did write an impact analysis piece just with what we've heard on some of the other running backs. So much focus has been on Lloyd, rightfully so, but we wrote sort of about the impact of it, how it changes the outlook, and what we've heard on some of the other backs. And that's on the front page of Gamecock Central too for subscribers. If you guys would like to support us and jump in and get access to all our content, 60-day free trial in there. We've had some watchers jump in on that lately, and we greatly appreciate you guys very much.
Yeah. So, I see a couple people who maybe you've been working today that have commented just asking about the injury. It is severe. It's an ACL tear, left knee, out for the year. Not just something that's being reported. That's been confirmed by the school. It's official. Lloyd has made comments about it on social media. His teammates have made comments. So, yeah, it's true. Done for the year, and he will have to have surgery on that at some point. No surgery date yet, but he'll have to have surgery. I imagine once the swelling goes down, I guess is how that normally seems to work. And then he will start the rehab process and be back next year. Will not count. This won't even count, I guess, as a redshirt year. This just won't count at all by NCAA rules for this year due to everything with COVID. So, that's sort of the latest there on Lloyd. Okay, so Bobo did talk today for about 30 minutes. First time we've heard from him, obviously since fall camp started, or preseason camp, whatever you want to call it. Chris, real quick, first and foremost, what was the very first thing off top that caught your eye about what Bobo had to say?
I was more tuned into, I think, the off-field, the on-field stuff. He started with the off-field stuff. He went into maybe a little bit more detail than I thought about some of it, and for obvious reasons, he didn't dive into some of that stuff and give away, every single thing that's going on. But just after the story came out in the Coloradoan with making allegations towards Mike Bobo, he did address that some. I wasn't surprised by any of that. We have already said that our expectation unless something new, unforeseen comes to light, is that everything's going to be, fine there in terms of nothing significant's going to happen. We don't think. But, I was sort of tuned into the on-field stuff and him. I think Bobo, I'm always really interested to hear him talk because he's pretty forthcoming. He sounds a lot like a head coach when he talks, which he's been a head coach. He's been a longtime coordinator. He's seen a lot. He's got a ton of experience. And so I think he's pretty honest with what he says, and I think he's always insightful. And so just to hear him talk about quarterbacks and what he expects, and even hearing him talk about guys' injuries and sort of the realities of coming back from injuries, whether it's MarShawn or talking about Colin Hill and Nick Muse and them not being 100%, Muse not being 100%, Colin Hill still having some swelling sometimes, and just things that you don't always hear coaches talk about. I think that's really sort of refreshing that he's so forthcoming with that stuff. But to get back to some actual, team stuff, I think just hearing him talk about the playmakers and sort of this ongoing search for it, right? Talking about how, they were watching tape and Lloyd is one of their guys that they could count on to be a playmaker, and now he's out of the picture. And then talking about how if Luke Doty's one of the best guys, they won't hesitate to play him 30 snaps, But he's still very much, I think you can tell he's really, really focused on, how can we find some guys we can count on to go out and be playmakers for us. Talking with Shi Smith about, hey, man, this is what we need you to do. This is the guy that we need you to be, and just getting him to that point. I thought all of that was sort of fascinating, and that's really what I took away from it.
Yeah, so, Chris, I would say if you look at I think we're getting a little feedback again, but if you sort of look at the totality of what Bobo said, he hit on a lot of positions, a lot of position groups. And, I think we talked about this in the podcast. I think the quarterback position is a sort of position battle that hasn't been talked about quite as much, as maybe it would have been any other year. And I think we're starting to see, though, it play out what we had thought was going to be the case in the beginning, and that's that this is a true quarterback competition at that position. Even though we knew that, a few details as far as how they're going about it, Chris, having, I think he said Helinski day 1 got to take first-team reps. Colin Hill day 2 takes first-team reps. I'm guessing Helinski, didn't have practice today. It'll be Helinski again day 3, which will be tomorrow. So that's the approach they're taking as far as how they split it up. At some point, you obviously want to start, paring that down and having some, this is my one, this is my guy. But for right now, it's very even. You could even tell in the Zoom stuff today with players, Chris, I think the players have been very well coached, not to mention things about who might be the quarterback. They said, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, how the reps are split. So that to me was interesting, intriguing. I think if anybody's assuming, from the beginning that Helinski was just going to walk in and be the starter just because he was in his second year, I don't think that's the case. I think this is a true open battle. Both guys are going to have to fight it out. Scrimmages haven't started yet. Pad play hasn't started yet. So we're gonna that's gonna be something that we track moving forward. And he reiterated again something we heard in the spring from his comments, that he is pretty happy with the play of his quarterback room. Really from both guys. And then additionally, Chris, the thing that also caught my eye about that was when he started talking about Luke Doty. He put Luke and MarShawn Lloyd in the same sentence, which is something that people around the program have been doing since January. Those two guys are actually really good friends, like best buddies, because they have the same approach to football, to athletics, to competing, to working hard, to getting up early, to doing all the things right. I say those are the guys I call professionals. They treat college athletics like they're already a professional athlete. So no surprise there. A slight surprise for me, Chris, with Luke. We know he's been working in at receiver, but I thought Bobo sort of went a little bit out of his way to reiterate, hey, I told Luke, I know you're in the receiver room, but we want to make sure you're back in this quarterback room as much as possible as well, because he went as far as saying Luke's firmly in this competition at quarterback as well. And, I think we all think it's going to be Helinski or Hill as the starter based on the fact they're older guys and their experience, and Luke is a true freshman. But I did think Bobo made a point to say, hey, Luke Doty is in the competition at quarterback as well, which really speaks highly for him, certainly for the future, but for now as well.
Yeah, for sure. He mentioned that Luke had taken some first team reps, and then he was sort of careful to say a few, not to sort of overdo it. But yeah, I mean, and that's where they're at, man. I mean, again, one of the reasons that Luke Doty, there's two reasons. I'll back up. Two reasons that he's playing some receiver. Number one, credit to him because he's a really good athlete, and he's got the mental capacity and the desire to be unselfish and help the team. Secondly, they need playmakers, right? So you look around the team, and Muschamp and Bobo both alluded to this. You look around the team and you say, who are our best guys? Who are our guys on this side of the ball, regardless of position, that can make plays for us? And Luke Doty was one of those guys. And so then you figure out, well, can he make the most plays at quarterback this year or maybe at receiver? Because receiver is an even bigger need, you could say, for them than even quarterback, where they feel like they've got maybe a couple options, and we'll see how that plays out. So I did think that was striking, but it matches everything we've heard with Luke. Just people rave about him too. And so you try to get him on the field somehow. Quarterback, they've made it clear they feel like long-term and maybe even short-term, he could be a quarterback for them and be a really good one. And we knew that based on, his progression as a high school player and how good he ended up by the time he was a senior. But no doubt, man, he can help this team with the ball in his hands. So get the ball in his hands. If that's a receiver, then that's great too.
Yeah, definitely. I did see a quick question here that I wanted to hit on real quick from No Name on YouTube. Just really get a name, buddy. It helps out a lot. But that Georgia has 7 scholarship running backs. I didn't know they had that many. South Carolina has 5. Only 4 can play right now, as he pointed out. I'm trying to think back to the numbers in my head right now. Someone brought this up to me recently, and I'm trying to think of what they told me. If they're at 5 right now, and they're bringing in two this offseason.
Yeah.
And they're losing none right now. So I would say 5 isn't. So they're going to go from 5 to 7. Most teams, Chris, I don't think carry 7 necessarily, and it actually depends a lot of times on the personnel you use. Some coaches may say we're going to carry an extra receiver, or some coaches may say, hey, we're going to carry an extra tight end compared to the average coach. You know what I mean? Some places, Georgia running back and by a lot of accounts, I think they're holding 7. Some of that is probably that they can recruit so well at that position, they just stockpile. You're going to take an extra guy if he's an absolute stud. So yeah. 5 scholarships, I don't think that's light, but that is probably on the lower end of being fine, whereas 7 is probably a little bit on the higher end of numbers. I would imagine most teams are like somewhere in between that. South Carolina, from what I was told, would have been okay just carrying 6 into next year, but it was more about the fact that they really liked Ontario Brown and thought he brought a lot of good things to the program, had offered him and wanted to take him, and that puts them at 7. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It does sort of fluctuate based on you're really getting Chris into like roster construction philosophy as far as how you separate a roster out, as far as individual position groups, and the fact that you have 85. So taking an extra guy here means you have to drop somebody at a different position. So, But a really good thought and a good point there. No name. So, all right, let's go to receivers because we have at least received new information on receivers in that we talked about receivers all offseason. And frankly, talking about receivers got to be just a little bit monotonous because we were talking about the same stuff just over and over and over again. And it was South Carolina needs receivers to step up. We at least are starting to get a feel for that position, Chris, and some guys that are stepping up. But hey, here's the other part. As much as we talked about yesterday how Muschamp had said, hey, feel really good about the receivers today. The receiver, and this was the quotes from Muschamp via USC, receivers won some one-on-one battles yesterday. Muschamp going the positive route. We heard Bobo again today go back to the big picture route. Obviously, that positive stuff was from one day of practice. Big picture-wise, what Bobo is saying, Chris, publicly, very much, as you said earlier, very much matches the stuff we've heard behind the scenes all offseason, which is need receivers, need playmakers, the word playmakers. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be at the receiver position, just need guys who can go make plays for you. So I think we've learned a little bit about receivers so far. There are – I would sort of – here's how I would maybe, I guess, categorize how I feel about it right now, Chris. Way too early to know. Still a question, still a concern, but there are at least some positive signs of some guys who could step up because you never know with freshmen. We didn't know which freshmen could be counted on, which ones wouldn't be. Rico Powers getting praise from everybody. Then, of course, the potential of the transfer in Jalen Brooks. There are some good signs there, but make no mistake, Bobo said, hey, we still need guys who can make plays.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out there just a little bit, the last couple seconds, but I got most of it. Yeah, there are some, and I've said this before. Some of the wide receiver moves, I still think that South Carolina's recruited a little bit better there than has shown. Last year, there were a variety of reasons they weren't as good at wideout. They had some slumps. They have had some misses at wideout on the recruiting trail, but they had, you had a guy in Josh Finn that was slumping. Or Trey Smith wasn't on the field. Xavier Legette was a true freshman. They had a bunch of guys injured at the end of the year. The offense, the run game fell apart. Quarterback play wasn't good at the end of the year. So it was like all these things mixed together. So that said, even when you take a fully healthy roster and experience bringing back, it still is a concern. Brian Edwards not on the roster. Having your top number one guy coming back, Shi Smith, still, and Mike Bobo talked about this today, alluded to it earlier, still trying to get him to that consistent level, right? He's not as proven a commodity as, hey, we got Brian Edwards back this year. You know what you're getting there, right? There's still an element with Shi Smith if he needs to take that next step forward. Then you're banking on guys like Legette taking a step forward. You're hoping Jalen Brooks gets that waiver. You're hoping that Luke Doty can successfully transition in year one to be able to help you. DeCarrion Joyner transitioning from quarterback to receiver. Having some other guys, Smith and Van and some of these other guys on the roster take a step forward and everybody stay healthy. So there's some pieces there that I think could give people in that building or the fans some hope that they can be pretty good. They're not going to be amazing at receiver this year, I don't think, but can they be better? I think they can, but it still is and should be, because it's fair to have it in that category. It's a prove it category, right? You got to prove that in practice you can do it, and then when the lights come on that you can do it as well. So there are some moves that have been made that have been intriguing, like the Brooks move, like Doty. There's some interesting things there, and there have been some encouraging signs from time to time, but they got to be more consistent with it. And like I said, prove it.
Agreed. And let's see if let's try to run through. Yeah, we got some more comments here. Is Jay, you're pretty much a receiver now. Actually, I would say Jay, it seems like Chris, Jay played more receiver last year in practice than maybe he has this year. Is I get that he's been in the quarterback room a lot more this year. Let's see. Will Kevin Harris start? We gave a lot of thoughts on that earlier. I think it's probably Zaquandre White. But we're going to archive this video as well after the fact. So if you want to go back and see our full comments on who we feel would be taking over for Lloyd, just shoot back. That's probably in the first 5 to 7 minutes or so. You'll get those comments as well because we went in depth about it. And I don't want to make everybody else sit through it again as well. Let's he talked. So I was working a little bit while listening to Bobo, Chris. He did talk about the tight ends a little bit, I think. Did you catch the tight end part? We got somebody asking about tight ends. Did you catch that?
Yeah, caught a little bit of it. And he mentioned how I think the overarching theme there was that it's not his exact words, it's sort of just me taking what he said and paraphrasing it and summarizing it. Like they just don't know what they have exactly, right? We know that a couple of the guys, the highly regarded guys they had come in, Jaheim Bell's out for a little while because he had a meniscus from like high school. Eric Shaw had to have some bone spurs cleaned up. A couple guys with a lot of upside. Nick Muse, as we mentioned earlier, that's their top returning guy, but they've had him on a little bit of a pitch count, recovering from last year's ACL injury. He's still getting back, to form. He's practicing. He's out there, but they've got him limited a little bit as they ease him back in. And then what Bobo did mention was that, Chandler Farrell played some last year there. Obviously, he's been playing multiple positions there. He's been playing the defensive line lately. And then they had Kyle Markway last year, who's no longer on the roster. So it's like Muse played some last year. And then behind him, you got a lot of guys that haven't played a ton, like Keyshawn Toney, for example, who played some as a true freshman last year. Lots of, Will Register. Kansas moved over to tight end, but he played receiver last year. And, so there's several guys there that they're looking at, but they don't entirely know what they have because there's sort of this hodgepodge of different reasons. One of them just being inexperience, right? Trey Kenyon, being another one. So lots of guys there, but it's about having them all there, finding out throughout camp sort of what you have. And so that's why it's still a question mark. There are some talented guys there for sure. I really like the two freshmen, especially Eric Shaw, long-term with upside. But Jaheim Bell, played a lot of receiver in high school, and he's out right now, and Shaw's coming back. So still just some questions there.
Yeah, dude, I would go back to actually what Nick Muse said earlier in the day, Chris. All that's completely overshadowed by everything else that's happened today. But his comments on Will Register, who we had actually started to hear some really positive things about, he said Will Register looks like a new Will, he said. So the confidence is up. I think whenever a guy – you start to hear their confidence is up, and you can make the case of, well, does better play create confidence, or does confidence create better play? They both build on each other, I tend to think. But that's a very positive sign. And I think when you look at this Bobo offense, this is something we were even told early on, Chris, in recruiting when Bobo took over, is that they want to at least have that one guy who can sort of be that inline tight end, that can set the edge, can do some things, some dirty work in the blocking department for you, and that they maybe didn't necessarily have that on the roster. Well, I think if you look at a skill set standpoint, those are probably some things that Will Register can do, and maybe being in this new scheme fits him a bit better than some of the things he was going to be asked to do in the scheme before, So I think if you're talking about guys who could maybe benefit from a new scheme, the early returns are that Will Register. Now they got to put the pads on. It's got to continue. We all know that. We're projecting because we're a couple of practices in, but I think there are some positives there as far as scheme fit with a guy who was already on your campus, already on the roster. And so, sometimes that happens. You bring in a new coach and boom, it's just a better fit. And I think that could be the case there. So let's quickly, and I want to get to T-Rob as well. There was a little bit of scheme talk too.
Yep.
And so let's go to that, Chris. I think you start to get the sense that, and I can't remember exactly how Bobo said it, but you start to get the sense that they've started to get a feel for what they want the scheme to look like. Now, and you hear coaches use this terminology a lot, it's, well, what are we going to major in? Which means they know sort of what they're going to do. Right now, the whiteboard or the video board or whatever, it's very expansive. There's all types of stuff at it. You're throwing everything at the wall. What are we going to major in means, what do we hang our hat on? What can we do best? And that is probably what's going to be determined moving forward in the padded practices, in the scrimmages and stuff like that. But I do think we're very slowly starting to get a feel a little bit for what the scheme might possibly be.
And Bobo mentioned that. He said, he's basically said, I'm trying to figure it out still, but I've got a better idea. Now, the next question from people may be, well, what is it? We don't entirely know. We haven't seen any of practice. And so we'll be able to ascertain a little bit more of that as camp goes on, as they put the pads on. Again, they've had a couple practices, and today they were, just meeting and all that kind of stuff. So it'll take some time to figure it out. But now, does it adjust? Because now you're down a back who you were really counting on, and a back that you could say, here's a guy who's really good. He's one of our few playmakers that we feel really good about, even though he hasn't taken a college snap in MarShawn Lloyd. We feel good about this guy. So here's some things we can do with him. Well, now that's not there. And so maybe you adjust that a little bit. But we know that Mike Bobo's run a lot of different stuff in his career. You look at what he did at Georgia. He took some of that and moved it to Colorado State, but he also played more spread type stuff, H-back, 4-wide, gun stuff at Colorado State as well. And I think, a misconception maybe about, Bobo at Georgia even was, you think about running the ball a ton, and there's no doubt they did. They had a bunch of really good backs there. They rushed for a bunch of yards, but they threw it a lot as well. I mean, you talk about Aaron Murray with multiple 3,000-yard passing seasons. If Carolina could be, 3/4 of what Georgia was some years, that'd be a really pretty good offensive team. And I don't know if they'll get there this year. But yeah, I'll be intrigued to see by what it ends up being. I don't know, man, if you have any thoughts on sort of what they're thinking on the identity, so far of this team, particularly in light of today's news. I mean, does it change? I think that's a question.
I don't know. And, one of the questions there is Bobo going to lean on the run like he did at Georgia? I honestly, if you'd asked me that 24 hours ago, I would have said yes. And, I think Zaquandre White can give you some of those things. But here's the thing, the beauty of what I thought South Carolina had 24 hours ago was the potential for a 1-2 punch with MarShawn Lloyd and Zaquandre White. And now, and who are we to completely downplay what maybe Kevin Harris can do, what maybe somebody like Deshaun Fenwick, who has been very driven, who's had the right mindset, who has come in and sort of wiped the slate clean. I think Kevin Harris and Deshaun Fenwick have both, impressed the staff as far, you have a new coach and a new offensive coordinator. I think they've impressed Bobo and Des Kitchings as far as just saying yesterday or last year is out. Here's a new opportunity. So do they take this and run with it? We'll see. But I do think, like we said at the beginning, White is sort of that dynamic guy. Can you find a second dynamic guy in the bunch? Now, for me, becomes the question. But what does the scheme actually look like? I don't know. I think you sense, even with Fenwick, he said there's some excitement about the running game. I think it's going to be a much more, what would you say, diverse or multiple scheme, a lot more pro-style elements. We've heard that some guys have talked about how basically it's been hard on the defense in practice. T-Rob said the same, that he was excited to see Bobo's offense on game day. Now, in general, Chris, some of these pro-style offenses, they can be a little bit more difficult to learn on the fly, I think. So I think it's helped that they've had the extra practice time as well. So, again, multiple, diverse, which generally means you have a lot of different stuff. But as the season goes on and as you really see what you have, maybe a guy you're counting on gets hurt, you have to adapt. Maybe Rico Powers by week 5 is so good that he just has to be on the field. So then, maybe you're throwing a little bit more. It all depends. Maybe Eric Shaw gets back healthy and they're like, dang, this dude can't be covered at tight end. Let's go more 2 tight ends. It's going to be a fluid thing, I think.
It is. And, and even the best laid plans can, be laid to waste, I think, at some point, just based on how the season's going or personnel changes. I mean, you always have to adapt those different things, just like you're saying, whether it's guys stepping forward or guys getting hurt. I do tend to think that, when we talk about offensive identity with this bunch, we don't know for sure on the defense, but we think going into this year that the defense has a chance to be solid, a pretty good group. One of the best in the country, don't know about that, but they have a chance to be pretty good. And then you consider the fact that we're still sitting here at the beginning of preseason camp going, sort of where are the playmakers at, right? And so you don't get the sense that this is a team that's going to be able to just go get into shootouts with people. Are they going to have the horses for that? Probably not. And so do we see a little bit more, the question like you hit on earlier, Wes, running the ball? Do we see more of the ball control type? Maybe a little bit. Do you try to slow the game down? I think people want to score points. I know that, especially after watching last season. I get that. But can you be better in some key areas? Can you convert in the red zone much better than you did last year? Can you stay on the field some on third down, move the chain? Can you play good defense? This team this year may be better suited, to play that style. And I think maybe that's what Bobo's thinking right now. Not even just in terms of what are our personnel packages and our schemes, but how are we going to do this, in terms of structuring how fast we go and all those different types of things. Now, you certainly have to think about scheme as well. And if you are worried about your wide receivers, my guess is you're not going 4 wide a ton. You're not out there pitching it around in 4 wide. Maybe you're leaning more towards the tight ends, but they got questions there too. So it's really interesting to follow, and I'll be intrigued to see, how all of it sort of comes out.
Yeah, I think safe bet you're not going to see a lot of 4 wide. I mean, even as good as they've been at receiver talent level, I mean, the last couple of years, we really have seen very, very little actual 4 wide. Even then, it's been a lot of, 3 wide and a tight end, or then sometimes 2 tights, 2 receivers. Yep. A lot of times it seems like. So we'll see. What's up, Shane? By the way, if y'all are joining us late, this will be posted as like a full video right after. And you may even, I don't know if YouTube will let you or Facebook will let you scroll back or not, but we hit on a lot of stuff at the beginning. But yeah, so after the fact, it'll be archived and you can watch it just as if it was a full posted video. So I don't want to miss out on talking some defense, Chris. So let's hit on what T-Rob had to say as well. And I'll tell you, he kind of, I want to start somewhere a little bit different. I'm always curious. You can always tell there are certain guys when they first get on campus that the coaches just talk about a little bit differently. And most of the time, those guys end up being really good players and contribute in year one and end up being even better, down the road, obviously. J.C. Horn, the second he arrived, people are talking about this kid. Jamie Robinson last year, I feel like people were talking about him, much like Rico Powers on offense. Well, I tell you the guy that, and I think, Chris, you and I talked earlier today, I think T-Rob may have stolen your thunder a little bit, but the surprise one for me, just because we really I hadn't picked up as much on him yet, would have been the fact whenever somebody on this defensive staff mentions DJ Wanham as a comparison for you. And that was the case. T-Rob talked about Tonka Hemingway, true freshman, defensive end, compared him to DJ Wanham, said this kid, does everything the right way. He's always in the right place. Said this guy's going to be a staple of our program, or has a chance to be a staple of our program. I don't think those are light words from this staff for a defensive player, Chris. Like, we've been around this group enough. We've heard them talk enough. They don't just pull stuff like that out of the air. That is a very positive sign. We already know what Jordan Birch brings in as far as upside. We already know and have heard positive vibes from many, many places about Boogie Huntley and even Makias Scott. So now throw in that review of Tonka Hemingway so far, and T-Rob said, he's got a long way to go. He's a true freshman. But, again, that says a lot about this incoming class of freshman defensive linemen that they landed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've had good things to say about all of them. And look, Birch, because he was a 5-star, and then you sort of go down the line, like people typically talk about guys, the higher ranked you are, the more they talk about you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just the way it goes. So Alex Huntley drew a lot of headlines. Even he at Hammond, and as a prospect, was overshadowed some by Jordan Birch because he was ranked as a 5-star. Jordan was. So a lot of people talk about those guys, but just doing some checking personnel wise and trying to figure out, some early standouts. Tonka Hemingway has come up to me independently of what T-Rob said, and that, he's a guy to watch for. I think our question, Wes, is where was he going to play? And through the first couple of days, he was outside, but our understanding is he looks really good physically. We knew in high school that he was a good player, and a lot of people thought inside the Carolina program, or people down in Conway, thought that, hey, this kid's a 3-sport athlete. He played baseball, basketball, and football. And so based on the time of the year, he's focused and training for one particular sport. His weight's fluctuating depending on those sports. One college, and he's football only, he's got a chance to be really good. You're just focused on that one sport, right? You're getting your weight right. You're optimizing your body and your performance for that one particular sport. We knew he was a great kid. Academically, off the field, we knew there'd be no issues there. And so he's appeared to be a model citizen like we all expected, but he's also made some noise just in terms of how he carries himself. And the Wanham thing was a great point, because, Wes, we remember when DJ Wanham was recruited to South Carolina, he was a 2-star guy that Carolina flipped from Indiana. A lot of people rolled their eyes. Now he's in the NFL, and he was a really good player for South Carolina. Will Muschamp loved DJ during the recruiting process, sort of really took to him late in that first class, and they wanted him, and he developed quite well. And a lot of that, yeah, DJ was talented, but he was just so, he was a guy that just had the right mindset and work ethic and just technically did everything right. And it sounds like Tonka's off to a similar start in terms of just how he carries and conducts himself.
Yeah, so, dude, I remember sitting there at Tonka Hemingway's announcement, and I've told the story before. I almost didn't get the Facebook Live up and running in time because, Chris and I have probably been to Lord knows how many announcements at this point in our life, but they never, ever, ever, ever start on time, right? Except for Tonka Hemingway's. It started 2 minutes early, and I'm sitting there like trying to pull my phone out, trying to get the thing going, and my man is like, thank everybody for coming. I'm committing. Boom, South Carolina, hat on. Thank y'all. Leave me alone. I'm going back to whatever I was doing, because he doesn't care about the flash, the talking to the media, the 4-star this, 5-star that. He wants to just do his thing. He's like a put my head down and go to work type guy. And I was laughing. I was sitting doing my work after, and one of the Conway assistant coaches, I mentioned that to him. I was like, man, that was quick. He's like, that's him, dude. He just puts his head down, goes to work. Also told me a story about this dude hitting absolute bombs on the baseball field at Conway in practice, just tree-topping the ball. And it's just one of those guys. I'll admit it, Chris. I'm a bit jealous, because there are some people that just physically just can just do about anything they want. And from everything I've heard, I think Tonka was that guy in high school.
Yep.
Football standout, basketball standout, baseball standout. He was National Honor Society, National Spanish Honor Society. he was a finalist, and I can't remember the name of the award. He was a finalist for an athletic an academic award for athletes, top 5 in the country finalists, I think, for an award this past offseason. So just all around great dude. And I knew, Chris, I should have known because we were wondering if he'd be a defensive tackle or defensive end. I knew, that he was going to be a defensive end when I saw him the other day in town. And I knew he had pretty good taste when he was eating at Mod Pizza. So I was like, all right, maybe this guy has a chance, but looked good physically. We wondered, is he a defensive tackle? He still may be long-term, but looking at him, dude, and I mean this in a good way, he's slim, like he's trimmed up. And I think that helps them with the move. Did you get the sense from T-Rob that the plan really is Enigbare at Buck? That was something they had talked about, certainly being a possibility, but it seemed like that was maybe more like not just an idea, more like that could be the plan this year from the way T-Rob talked about that. The added depth at defensive end, though, if you can count on Tonka Hemingway all of a sudden, helps you to make that move and also lets you bring along Jordan Burch at his pace as opposed to being in this like thrown into the fire pace.
It does seem that way. And, he talked about Brad Johnson, who has sort of been viewed as the incumbent at Buck. But beyond that, there was always, okay, Brad Johnson, then you got Fitton, then you got Birch as a freshman, and then you got the possibility of, hey, do you move a Aaron Sterling or a JJ Enigbare? And so we've gotten some answers to that. And one of them is that, T-Rob mentioned putting Brad Johnson at Buck in some sub packages, but also playing him at Sam. And so it does look like they've created a little bit more of there's been a little bit more clarity there in terms of maybe because look, Enigbare and Sterling, that may be 2 of your best 4. So let's figure out how to get those guys on the field at the same time. And for a guy who with natural pass rush ability like Enigbare, it makes sense to give him a look there. So you may be right. And having a guy in Tonka that can play defensive end right off the bat, if he can give you something if needed, that's certainly helpful.
Yep. So, all right, man. I think, is there anything else on defense you want to add? We're going to have plenty of content on Gamecock Central. I'm hoping, I know, Chris, you've been picking up some stuff the last day or so. I picked up some stuff as well. I'm thinking probably by the end of the week for our subscribers, we're going to have maybe, hey, here's what we've learned based on some combination of everything that's been said publicly, what we're hearing behind the scenes, and what it all means, and just giving you some perspective. I think that's a big part of our job right now, is to tell you what is just noise and what is going to actually play out on the field this season. So we're going to try to do that on GamecockCentral.com. You can check it out for free with a 60-day free trial, code GC60. I see we're about to hit an hour, and we've dropped under 100 live viewers right now. So I think that is our cue to roll on. But as y'all are starting to see, we're going to do these more and more. Chris, our numbers are going up. So I'm excited about that. I hope y'all are enjoying the show. Quick tease, I think it's something we can continue to do during the season. And Chris, everybody can see your shirt right there. And I've had 3 different people, because you've been wearing a shirt like that during our shows, 3 different people reach out about how they could get a shirt like that. So if there is a market for something like that, please let us know. Put it in the comments, reach out. It's one of those things where we're definitely for doing something like that if there's a market for it. So if there is, throw it in the comments. If you would buy one, we can make that happen. And it might not be as cool as Chris's, but we'll get you something close. All right, dude, you got any final thoughts here?
Yeah, man, I just want to say, again, we sort of touched on this yesterday, but we really appreciate everybody watching, reading the site, supporting in sort of the sports layoff period. And we're going to keep doing it. Keep doing these more often. Check out the site. Support us if you like what you see. And there's tons of content on there right now for everyone.
Yeah, and we feel for y'all. I know today pretty tough for Gamecock fans. It's been a crazy offseason. So I don't know. Hopefully this has been cathartic a little bit for you. But yeah, we'll talk to you all soon. We'll see you on here, and we'll see you on GamecockCentral.com.